So my name is Scott Herr, and I am, I guess you could say, a side B gay Christian. And my pronouns are he, him, and I've been involved with GCN since 2000, or QCF, sorry, GCN QCF, since the early 2000s. So
Wonderful. Wow,
yeah,
that's great.
yeah.
So you were in kind of the first wave. The early 2000s was kind of when things were kicking off.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's when I discovered it. I kind of dipped my toe into it a little bit and I mean, I got more and more involved with the online community. And because of timing and finances and a number of other things, I wasn't able actually to attend a conference until this past one in Chicago. So,
For real.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
for
real.
real.
I
I
That
know.
know.
was your
Most
Most
people
first
are
people are
like,
like,
what?
conference?
what?
But
But
I'm
I'm
like,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, for real. So.
Tell me about like what did like just shoot from the hip, but what were some of your reactions or how was it?
From the
From the
conference.
conference.
Yeah.
So I loved being in a space that was like unabashedly
Really
queer,
queer,
Cool.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
and Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think what really struck me was what QCF does really well um, is it gives so many people who have been hurt by their churches and their families in such deep ways. It gives them a place to where they can go and just hear God loves you, without any strings attached to it, completely unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That Jesus is waiting for you and loves you and cares about you and cherishes you. And I I just that just really hit me profoundly, you know, and that everyone is welcome, that nobody is, that we don't want to exclude anybody as not, at least not intentionally. and I loved that commitment. I loved the fact that, leading up to the conference, I was a little worried just because so much of the stuff on social media and things that I had heard and I definitely am sensitive to the fact that, you know, being side B, it can be triggering for people. It can be a very negative thing for to have me there. But when push came to shove, at least on the ground, among the people that I interacted with, I never experienced anything like that.
That's good.
And I was pleasantly surprised at the number of people who came to the workshop that we put together. And so it was really, it was overall, I felt it was a positive experience. And I learned a lot. I mean, I learned more about issues that I still feel like I'm a little bit ignorant about in terms of trans issues and some of those other things. And so that was that. It was a very good weekend for me in many, many ways.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite the experience.
Yeah.
It is. It's overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also, I think there's also something I sometimes I like going to spaces where I am kind of on the outside, where I am the other
Uh-huh.
in many ways, because it helps me to remember what it's like for it helps me remember what it's like for other people when I'm in a place where I'm in the majority and other people are not quite so are not in the majority and maybe not are not quite don't feel as welcome or feel like, ooh, it's going to be weird for me to be here, kind of thing. And then I feel like that helps to soften my heart and make me more open to just accepting people where they are.
Sure.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Right.
Yeah. In terms of like identity formation,
Hmm.
so kind of going for the jugular here, if I may, what do you feel like were some of the pillars that really helped you? Am I breaking up?
Yeah, you were breaking up there just a little bit.
Okay.
And so I don't know if it's you or it's me.
Okay.
So let me, I'm just going to turn off my Wi-Fi just to, oh, okay, there we go.
There we go.
Okay. I knew if I whenever I switch my Wi-Fi off, it takes
Sure.
just a second too. So we'll see. Hopefully, if it's
Okay.
because I know with your storm, it may be an issue.
Yeah,
So
that might be true. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
So yeah. So in terms of identity formation, as a Christian, as a
Hmm.
man who identifies as side B, what were some of the pillars that
Hmm.
really remained steadfast for you as you were kind of establishing your identity?
Hmm. Ooh, that's a good question. Well, I think for me, first of all, a strong connection to my faith was probably one of the biggest pillars. Um, as I went through a a conversion experience within my own Christianity, within my own Christian faith, going from a Lutheran upbringing to a Catholic, to choosing to become Catholic, and and that became a very, very significant pillar in my life. Wanting to live that as authentically as I could, being with as much integrity as I could, even though I often do not do that for all sorts of different reasons.
Sure, sure.
But trying to keep that was probably the biggest thing. And then placing as I've come over the years, because for me, dealing with being gay, being part of the LGBTQ plus community has been a much longer and drawn out part of my identity, as I've come to see myself. And but always overarching that has been that my faith. And so even the pillar of LGBTQ plus in my life, which is definitely a pillar, um, that has kind of been placed within the church and within the community of the church. So I, I I think for me, like there's the I don't know if pillars is a good way to think about it, but it's kind of like places where I put myself. One, definitely the church, because my Christian faith is, for me, it's understood and lived out within this communion of believers who profess a certain faith, and and then being gay gets placed within that broader context. And so as a side B person, that's how I've come to form my identity more than anything else, because oftentimes I think, okay, yeah, it would be, in some ways, it would be easier for me to if I could just embrace side A theology for whatever reasons, it'd be so much greater if I could go to an affirming church, maybe, um, and find that as like my primary home, my primary place. But there's always been something that's left me a little unsettled in all of that. And for some reason, I just really felt the call of God into this community, and knowing that for me, and I think for a lot of other side B people, but I can only speak for me really, that that my that to go outside of that would be kind of breaking a big pillar of my identity. And it's not something that I feel like God is calling me to. So so really, that I think that particular, like, strong feeling, that strong call from God into the Catholic Church, and especially now into an Eastern Catholic Church, um, has has really probably, been the biggest influence on me. Um, yeah.
Sure.
So I don't know if that answers your question exactly,
Absolutely.
but
Absolutely. As
okay.
you're talking here, I'm kind of thinking about what it would have felt like to watch that pillar crumble.
Mm-hmm.
What for you
Yeah.
would that have felt like?
Um,
Losing your faith
Gosh.
community or
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, there the thing is, like, the one thing about the Catholic Church is it does not always make it easy for you to be in the Catholic Church in so many ways. I mean, and not just even as a gay person. I mean, just as a human being in many ways. Watching what has gone on with the whole sexual abuse scandal, and and the way people have been um, treated and all of that. It's been horrible, and in many ways that pillar has definitely had chips put into it, and trying to feeling a bit at sea in the midst of all that has left me feeling, gosh, what does it really mean to be Catholic, and what does it mean to be faithful in the midst of this church where there are so many people who don't seem to be interested in being faithful to it in so many different levels. And I'm thinking primarily of the leaders of the church, who obviously don't yeah have not always been lived up to what they should be, in all of this. And and but still, in the midst of all that, there was a strong groundedness and a strong rootedness, like, no, this is where you should be. And if that whole thing tumbled away, I would feel really, really naked, really, really, almost probably go through a period of feeling abandoned by God, and just like, okay, I thought this is where you wanted me completely, but I just don't know what to do. It really would be like just having the rubbles of a building that's been destroyed in a tornado and trying to, like, piece out and be like, okay, okay, this part is good. I remember this, but yet everything else is completely gone. And I wouldn't, it would be really, really, it'd be really, really hard.
Yeah.
And that's, that is probably the best analogy that I could come up with as I'm thinking about it now and feeling it.
Yeah, 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 I bet.
You
It's
know?
even scary to think about it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, in a
I
certain
bet.
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, because through it all, I mean, there've been moments where it's been a little rough, but through it all, I mean, there's been a sense of grounding. And even coming into the Eastern Catholic churches has been really kind of shaking of that pillar, because the way the faith is lived and talked about in so many ways is so different that it has been almost like coming into a new church in
Yeah.
some ways.
Yeah, I bet. I
Yeah.
bet. I asked that question because I think I always want it to be on the table how sincere faith
Mhm.
is,
Yeah.
to how we feel safe,
Hmm.
whether that's with God or in our world, just generally, or in relationships. But
Right.
that depth that this identity marker holds. It's not just a place you go, mass
Hmm.
on a Sunday afternoon or whatever it might be,
Right.
but it's a way that you've structured your life.
Yeah. Yeah, really. Yeah, it's probably the most important thing for me, and the most important, like, the barometer by which I gauge other things that I do and how I um, work and interact and all that sort of stuff. But also throughout the period, throughout some of the things that I mentioned before, and when we talked about with getting stripped down and the chinks getting in the column or whatever image, has also come to kind of understand, okay, what accretions along the way have been kind of like made up by people, or what's essential to that faith, and what really is stuff that people have put onto it, which are burdens that we don't need to have and we don't need to bear. And that's where coming to think more and more about, and coming to terms and really embracing my identity as a member of the LGBTQ plus community, as a gay man, have really helped me to understand more and understand that better as well. So yeah.
It's so important, I think. As you're talking, I'm thinking about um, one of my favorite theorists to study. His name is Marcius, and he talks about he interviewed thousands of adolescents as they were kind of coming into their own. And he realized that there was the season where, or the beginning season of their life, where they just kind of foreclosed on their own identity. I'm this
Hmm.
because my parents taught me this is who I am, and this is what my
Right.
community told me. But then they go into this, they hit the pause button and they go into this like phase of, oh my goodness, who am I? And what
Right.
do I want to call myself? Because I want to call myself it, you know?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I kind of prefaced my question with that just to say, what was it like for you to go from Lutheran to
Hmm.
Catholicism?
Hmm.
What was that transition like? What spurred it on?
Um, yeah, so I think really what spurred it on for me, because this all kind of took place in high school and college. Um, what spurred it on was starting to come to grips with recognizing that I was different, that I was gay, really, in junior high, high school. And when I came to high school, which was like in the middle of the 1980s in Lincoln, Nebraska, I met my first gay activist, who was this guy who was a year older than I was. And it was a really eye-opening experience. I'd never experienced anything like that. And it really started, I hadn't even really started to unpack side of me other than the fact like I recognized that I had these feelings and I didn't know exactly what to do with all of that. And and so coming in high school, moving from a Lutheran, a secular, a Christian school, like middle school, junior high, to a secular, to a public high school was a bit of a shock as well. But also it brought me also into contact with a bunch of people that I would never have met otherwise. People who were of completely different faith backgrounds. Some didn't have any faith background at all. I started meeting some more people who were identifying as gay or bisexual or whatever. At that time, we didn't really use as many alphabet, as many identifiers as we do today, which is better today, but to be a little bit more specific. But at the time, gay, lesbian, bisexual, all of that, I didn't recognize. And at the time, what I encountered was a lot of most of the compassionate people that I met, most of the people who would have been who were willing to accept me, were not Christian. So basically, I went through a big faith crisis of coming from a very conservative family. It's a conservative area of the country, so culturally it's very conservative, but but religiously we were a very conservative family. And coming to be like, whoa, there's so much more to the world. And it just really unnerved me. And it was like that set up a big one of my faith crises. and and probably the one that then spurred me more than anything else to seek something else and kind of to move away from the church I grew up with. I started getting involved a little bit singing with a UCC church in Lincoln, which is very progressive in its theology. And 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 that was something else also in terms of coming to like re-experience God's love and acceptance in a way I hadn't experienced um, in a while, and acceptance by a community of people. But then when I went off to the university and I met a high church Anglican who was also gay, but really the first gay Christian who I had met. Because before I had met a lot of gay people, but none of them were Christian. And so here was this gay Christian man who had lots of experiences. He was sharing with me his time as an atheist, coming back into being a Christian, then being very high church and coming to a more traditional understanding of things. And and really he introduced me to Catholic things. And it was there that my heart found a lot of rest in a lot of that. And coming to understand a little bit about how what the Catholic Church was teaching about, gay people and versus what I had been brought up with was very different, and it was very I mean, I know we wouldn't use this word now to describe it, but at the time, I found it to be very affirming of me and what I was going through. But also it connected me, really, it was the strong connection with the past and what I perceived to be a strong unity among the faith of, among the church throughout the world, and some of these sorts of things really like pushed me into the Catholic Church more than anything else. And then just doing historically reading and coming to understand the history of Christianity, all of that sort of kind of pushed me into the Catholic Church. And also coming my friend's witness, and then because he eventually then became Catholic himself, and then also coming to know a religious sister who came to the university where I was at the time, and talking to her as well. And so kind of those things all kind of spurred me into the church. So yeah,
What
yeah.
you're talking about kind of reminds me of various personality inventories, like the Myers Briggs or the
Mm-hmm.
Enneagram, but it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like you found the echo to your voice. Like
Mm-hmm.
something that just resonates with you, and you're describing it almost like you found home.
Yeah, it did feel like that in many ways. Yeah, yeah. And it's when it's at its best, which doesn't always feel that way sometimes. But when it's at its best, it does feel like that to me. It does feel like this is where I feel most connected. This is where I feel most grounded. This is where I feel most comfortable, and all of that. Yeah.
Goodness, yeah. I'm thinking again of this pillar just kind of falling out from underneath you. It
Hmm.
would be like losing your family and your home.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, in many ways. Or almost like losing, yeah, yeah. I think a lot of, like, I don't know, like, Howard's End, the Enforcer book, where he really strongly talks about how strong place has such a connection, has such a strong influence on us. And when we lose that place, how we just it it the trauma, in a certain sense, is so deep that we just are unrooted and we don't know what to do. And yeah, that's how it would feel a lot for me.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
many ways. So
What does it
yeah.
feel like for you to show up as a side B gay man in that Catholic space?
Yeah, that has been, as so coming to really come to grips with being gay and what that fully looks like has been a longer journey for me in many ways, because I became Catholic when I was 20, and 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 I've had ups and downs with the Catholic faith a lot over the course of that, but that has always remained pretty steady for me. Um, but coming into being gay has been a much longer journey. For a long time, I really didn't think about it very much. And then, when I went off to a monastery for a while, the joy, so to speak, quote unquote, of going through reparative therapy. And while, I tell people that my experience in many ways wasn't as negative or as traumatic as it was for other people, and I completely recognize that. So, um, and going there really as a member of a religious community where I wasn't trying to become straight to get married, I think made a big difference for me. And also, it eventually ended up being kind of like regular therapy. And even though I was with Nicolosi himself, it it was interesting to watch him, and how many sometimes when things that didn't fit within the system that he had created, he just kind of dismissed them. And it was there that, while I was there, I also came to understand, man, this system, this really isn't all it's cracked up to be. I hadn't changed. And then eventually I left the monastery, and started to come to grips a little bit more with what it meant to be gay, and being willing to start thinking about myself, gosh, as a gay person. um, I still used SSA. I used same-sex attraction for a long time.
Ooh, me too.
Yeah, yeah, but I think what really kind of pushed me and propelled me over the edge in terms of really like, oh gosh, this is my community. This is I'm part of this family. This is part of who I am. This is part of my identity. And I'm sad to say it took this to make it happen, was the Pulse shooting. Was that I had already started to move in that direction and really embracing myself as gay and all that entails. But it was really the Pulse shooting was like that sense of like, oh my gosh, I could have been there, or any number of people that I know could have been there, and this sense of solidarity and like this is my family, and that was probably the thing that really impacted me the most from that. And I'm sorry to say that it took something so traumatic and horrible to make that happen for me. Um, and and since then, I think it's been an interesting journey for me within the Catholic spaces, especially. The church I go to here is primarily a Middle Eastern church, so there are cultural aspects of being Middle Eastern and being gay, and a language issue for some people, and so I am out to people when the conversation is right to have. It's not something that I don't go in wearing rainbow flags and all that sort of stuff, on a regular basis. But I'm definitely open about it. People know me, and we have a conversation. I definitely talk about it, and I will, open up when the opportunity arises. Um, I think it's important to be present in those spaces and to be willing to be identified as gay. Um, if anything, because gay people don't people who are openly gay often don't enter into those spaces, and I feel sometimes that it gives me the opportunity, God has put me there in some ways, to at least begin a conversation, to um, at least be a presence for people who might not ever experience a presence, who might not ever encounter another gay person, or another gay person who would be willing to talk with them and not dismiss them for whatever reasons. And and to be able to, and it's very interesting because even within those spaces, I've been able to hear people's stories who about their encounter with other gay people they know, or to hear them talk about, for example, like there's this really devout woman at my parish who um, I wasn't sure about talking to her about it, but I opened up to her about it, and she came back with these amazing stories about how she has known people who are transgender, and also to hear her heartbreak about her cousins. She has cousins who are lesbians, and they don't want to have anything to do with her because she's Catholic, and it breaks her heart because she's like, I just want to love them. Like, I don't really care. I don't have any, I'm not, it doesn't matter to me that they're lesbians. I just want to, they're my cousins. I love them. I just want them to be in my life, and I want to be in their life, and I just want to hug them, and, all that stuff. But they don't want to have anything to do with her, and I said, well, gosh, I said, I completely understand. I can understand where they're coming from, the hurt that I'm sure they've experienced from Christians along the way. And and I said, the best thing you can do is just keep being open, just keep inviting them, just keep letting them know that you want to love them, and just keep doing that. And that's the best that I can tell you at this point. But I feel like if I weren't there, or if I weren't willing to be open and to at least be like a quiet presence for people, that they can have conversation in a way maybe that's not threatening, um, can open people's hearts, can help them to unburden themselves in some way or another. And I don't feel the need to go in as an activist to be like, hey, we need to change, blah blah blah, because that's not what I feel I wouldn't want the church to change for me, frankly. But also I feel like there's definitely cultural things and ways people approach the LGBTQ plus community that do need to change. And I feel sometimes in those sorts of circumstances, being quiet, being not not necessarily quiet, I don't know if that's the right word, but being like a gentle, soft presence is sometimes better and more effective than being somebody who is coming in with all guns blazing, gonna shoot it up the place and tear it down and rebuild from the beginning, and it's not my personality. I'm not that
That
kind
kind
of
of
a
a
person
person
anyway.
anyway.
So,
I'm getting that
but
vibe a little bit.
yeah. I definitely have a strong heart. And thinking of the Enneagram, I'm definitely like a two. That's
Yeah,
definitely my,
totally. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
So
so I'm definitely about trying to build bridges and trying to do what I can to, yeah, to make people aware, hey, maybe you shouldn't say that sort of thing. Maybe there's a different way we can talk about this, or let's have this conversation,
it's like
sort
you
of
want to
thing.
be safety for people.
Yeah, because I feel like, I mean, it's easy as a gay person, you're seeking safety, you want to seek these places where you're safe. And I completely understand. I get that. And I want that too, for sure. But, but also I feel like sometimes in the conversation, we forget about the other side, and granted, for most of those people, they have safety because they're the majority. They're, they just have life, they're just safe in society. But um but when it comes to this conversation, they don't always I don't think they always feel safe, or they don't always feel like they know how to talk about it, and to be able to be a person with whom they can maybe make a few mistakes, um, maybe prepares them for a broader conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
If a 17-year-old and his parents walked into
Mm-hmm.
mass one day
Mm-hmm.
and he was, or she, maybe it's a young girl, but they were coming
Yeah.
out to themselves and talking about it with their family and
Mm-hmm.
really trying to create a very peaceful identity, what might you
Mm-hmm.
say to them, given your background and your story?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, the first thing I would want to say to them is to remind them that no matter what, no matter anything, I would want to remind them that God loves them, that God surrounds them with love, that the Trinity, that they're bathed in that love, and that nothing can ever separate them from that. And that's the first thing I would definitely want to reinforce, because yeah, so that's the first thing I would want to reinforce. And the second thing I would want to encourage them to do is to be open and honest about what was going on inside of them, and what they were feeling, and to and what they were experiencing, and to realize that all of that was okay, that there wasn't anything to be ashamed about in having those, in anything of that, feelings, thoughts, physical urges, whatever the case may be, that none of that is shameful, or something that you should feel that you have to not talk about, or that you have to hide, or that can't be brought out, or expressed, or love, or that sort of thing, you know. And then I would encourage them, because if they were coming and they were Catholic, obviously, I would encourage them to kind of unpack what the church really teaches. What's at the heart of that? Not something that you might hear from some woman who's homophobic in the parish, thinking, that somehow if you do X, Y, or Z, that you're going to go to hell immediately, that God hates you, all that sort of stuff. I'd say, okay, yeah, I mean, the church, if we're going to unpack it, is a side B. organization. But that doesn't mean that the church is unloving or unaccepting or any of those things, or doesn't have to be, as it has been a crumb across, but in so many ways. And but also I would say, okay, while you're examining all of these other things and while you're listening to many different voices, I'm sure you're hearing, let's look at this one voice that has been a presence in your life for 17 years, and let's see if the church has anything to say to you in what you're. And then in the midst of all that, I would be I'm willing to walk through all of that with you if you want, and you don't have to. And I want you to know I'm here for you, and I love you, and I care for you. I respect you, and I want to hear what you have to say, and I'm willing to listen. And then in the midst of all that, if you really truly discern that God leads you in a different way, I'm still going to be here for you. I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to accept you, and be all that for you. I may not, we may not agree on certain things, but I don't. But ultimately, um, you have to be true to what you believe God is calling you to do, and and I want to respect that, and and so that's probably what I would say.
Hmm. Yes.
In the
We,
midst of that.
love doesn't have the requisite of agreement.
Right.
Yeah. I
Exactly.
love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's one of the beautiful things about QCF, or just what I feel, and it's one thing that I've come to grips with as being like, okay, well, I'm gay, I'm Catholic, and all this other stuff, but there are a bunch of gay and Catholic people, not gay and there are a bunch of gay and Catholic people who don't agree with me, and there are a bunch of gay and Christian people that don't agree with me, and I'm like, well, how do I? It's like, oh, for so long I was like, how do I even, accept, or how do I pray with, or, fellowship with, side A people or whatever. And then one day it just hit me and I was like, okay, I can pray and fellowship with a bunch of Christians who don't necessarily see eye to eye with me on something like the Trinity, or who Jesus said he was, or um, or any abortion, or any number of other issues. And I'm like, why is this one issue such a stumbling block for that? And it really hit me that it was because I still hadn't accepted myself as a gay person, that I was still dealing with a lot of my own homophobia. And I'm still dealing with it. I still have vestiges of it that I'm still trying to work through. But it it just really struck me, and I'm like, man, yeah. And as soon as I realized that, then I was just like, yeah, I can, I can go and pray with, I can fellowship, and I can be at peace with all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, we don't agree. We may think each other is wrong about certain things. But yeah, but that doesn't mean that we can't be brothers and sisters, and we can't find those areas where we do have a common bond, and come to really explore that and really cherish that, and find the unity that is there, even if it's imperfect. Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, no, I love it. I
Yeah.
love it. Yeah, yeah, because I've thought a lot, because it's especially the last few years has been a real journey for me in that regard.
I bet. Oh, I
Yeah.
bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time. I'm just gonna
Oh,
end the
sure.
recording there, but this is so
Yeah.
cool. I'm so glad to have you.